Can you I'm curious from your perspective, how do you see the two of us as being divided in our approaches to the community? I mean, I would definitely say that I seem to be more connected to the sensibilities of the elite science community. I know that I can get their noses out of joint, but I track them very carefully.
Yeah, you had a lot of fights with those guys.
Okay.
Yeah. Whereas I didn't. So our academic lineages are quite different. I mean, I went to a smaller school. I went to UC San Diego. I didn't go to Harvard. But my advisor there in particle physics was Roger Dashin, but he passed away while I was a graduate student. And I finished up my dissertation under Henry Barbanel, who also had a background in particle physics, but it changed in nonlinear dynamics.
But in some sense, you were a self-advised PhD.
Yeah. So I was very much self-directed. Henry gave me the freedom to go explore whatever the heck I wanted. I had an extraordinary amount of freedom as a graduate student. And I hit this problem with spinors, and that's what I wanted to tackle. I wanted to figure out what they were geometrically, and no one else was interested in that problem. But through academia, I was a straight A student. I did really well. I never had any big conflicts with anybody else around. Yeah.
It was.
I spent a lot of the time surfing. I was living on the beach in La Jolla. It was beautiful. It was the greatest time of my life.
Okay.
People talk about, small, being in a small pond, big fish in a small pond and going to a bigger pond, you feel humbled. I never really had that experience. I was pretty close to the top of my class and really happy about it, how everything was going. Everything was great. I got my PhD, but there was no way I was going to get a job trying to understand the geometry of spinors when everybody else was doing string theory.
So you had already accepted that you were unemployable.
Yeah, I was totally unemployable. But I invested in Apple stock in the 90s, so I had FU money. So I said, see you guys, I'm going to go surf in Maui and work on this stuff on my own. Whereas you had a very different experience. So you were in Harvard in the math department studying mathematical physics. And as far as I know, you were making some really unusual breakthroughs that were very ahead of their time. But you weren't welcomed by the head people there. And so you had a conflict from the get-go.
Well, I had a very serious dispute about something in mathematics, which were called the self-dual equations, self-dual Yang-Mills equations, which were related to the regular Yang-Mills equations, which are the equations of force in the standard model. But the self-dual Yang-Mills equations were sort of a square root of those equations, and they were very difficult to work with and to solve. And I was very confused as to why people were investing in this particular form of these equations when it felt to me that we hadn't asked what constellation of equations these new equations belong to. And I'd proposed, again, spinors as a means of changing the equations, and was told that the exact quote was something like, if spinors had anything to do with this story, Nigel, who is Nigel Hitchin, would have told us. Like, it was just completely, it was bananas. And then I got into this issue that, well, spinors have to be quantized as fermions. That is, they have to be treated as if they were matter inside of quantum field theory. But this was not, like, we weren't doing quantum field theory. We were just doing classical geometry of a kind. And so none of the arguments, I put forward the set of equations, which later got recognized and completely changed the field, which came through Ed Witten and this guy called Natty Seiberg, both of them now professors at the Institute. And there was just no room to question why everybody was struggling with these almost intractable equations and just, getting great results, but with so much effort and work. So that was like a very weird story whereby, I think that by 1994, the Harvard department had woken up to the fact that it was not using the right equations. And I'd been actually proposing several sets of different equations. But that, when this all, came about, late 80s, early 90s, there was just no way to have a productive conversation about it.
Right. So you found yourself at odds with the people you were talking with, and you decided to go into finance instead, or how'd that happen?
No, I mean, I was trying to get back to physics, and I had proposed 3 sets of equations, one of which it turned out to have been done by somebody else in some place that I didn't know anything about, one of which later gets done by Seiberg and Witten, and then another set of equations that I wanted to connect to the actual standard model. And the department was just very concerned that this didn't really have anything to do with actual physics. It was sort of a coincidence in their mind that something that was vaguely physicsy was having great topological results. And so there was this, this fear. And I was sent to a guy named Sidney Coleman, who was a great quantum theorist. And he was much more encouraging than the Harvard math department.
Yeah, Sidney Coleman was a great guy.
I mean, an unbelievable human being. I had 2 memories of him, one of which was that he had all the time in the world for people who had no idea what they were doing. And the other was that he didn't suffer fools gladly. And then I realized that those are 2 contradictory images. And I unearthed old footage of him. He gave this brilliant lecture called Quantum Mechanics in Your Face to try to make the quantum. Have you ever seen this thing?
I have not.
Oh, it's a work of art. You'd love it. And it turns out both of these things were really true about him, that he had, if you were full of yourself and you were wrong, he would just cut you up into little pieces. But if you said, I don't quite understand this, he had all the time in the world to be the greatest of teachers.
No, I mean,